Step 3. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood God. At step 3, we faced a dilemma. We were told that we could not recover from this overwhelming and potentially deadly malady without a spiritual solution, and that having a spiritual solution meant full reliance on a power greater than our own. Furthermore, we were told that belief in a higher power was not enough to bring about recovery from compulsive debting. The recovery that would come from working all the remaining steps depended on our ability to surrender our compulsion to our higher power here and now, to release the compulsion to live beyond our means and replace it with a daily commitment to recovery. We had to give ourselves over to our higher power as fully as we used to surrender our lives to debting. To many of us, this felt like we were being asked to give up our independence, financial and otherwise. However, over time, we came to understand that working step 3 was our first experience of true spiritual independence. Some of us still wanted to know why this step was so necessary. We had been attending DA meetings, keeping our numbers, practicing the tools, and things were changing. We were changing things. Surely, we were now stronger, better informed about ourselves, and properly educated about the consequences of debting. Surely, our own will was sufficient to the task that lay ahead. After all, our own will was generally sufficient in other areas of our lives. Many of us had been taught the value of self-reliance, which must surely be useful here. Why was step 3 being called essential? When we shared these thoughts in DA, we heard from some longtime members who had found a quick fix in the tools and then decided to continue on their own without the steps, or who had simply drifted away from the fellowship to return later. For most, the slide had happened insidiously over time, paying the occasional bill late, getting a single credit card just in case, accepting a job without a contract, shopping the sales for items that were not needed and went unused, letting health coverage lapse, taking out a student loan, surely a sober investment in one's future. Gradually, they slipped back into compulsive debting, and they began to try to apply self-will to regain control over their lives with the help of the tips they had picked up in DA. Instead, the debting and the desperation increased. Driven by their defects of character, their lives were once more overwhelmed with chaos and unmanageability. They discovered for themselves what so many had learned before them, and what our literature tells us. Neither self-knowledge nor understanding of recovery will protect us from the compulsion to live beyond our means. The stories of these individuals were examples of how will was insufficient when it came to compulsion, and of how compulsive debting was very persistent. When we were debting, we were immersed in our disease. Once we found Debtors Anonymous, we realized that we needed to be immersed in the recovery process. This did not mean attending meetings 24 hours a day. It meant integrating recovery practices and principles into our daily lives. No recovery principle was more important than step 3. Turning our will and our lives over to the care of a higher power, of our own understanding, whether that was God, reality, life, or even sanity itself. It was the very core of spiritual program of Debtors Anonymous. Our sponsor emphasized this to us, suggesting that step 3 indicated that our higher power, however we experienced that power, was loving and would hold our will and our lives with tender care. People's stories persuaded us that care would be there if we kept reaching out for it and providing it to others. This comforted many of us, as we were still wondering what the implications of this action would be. Was taking the step giving over our whole selves? What if this higher power was one that changed our lives in ways we could not stand? For many of us, it was our sponsor who reminded us that we were choosing to believe in whatever higher power we chose. We did not have to believe in a loving God, they might say, but why not? Indeed, it was clear that this higher power was not going to control us like puppies. If that were true, we would certainly not need to work the remaining steps. Step 3 begins with the words, made a decision. This again indicated choice on our part, and indeed, a choice we could remake at any time when we felt the need. However, sometimes we saw this as a way out of committing to step 3. After all, we were just making the decision. We did not have to implement it yet. We would keep looking at it, examining it, intellectualizing about our higher power. We could always act on our decision later, right? Our sponsor warned us that this was shaky ground. We were told that making a decision meant acting on that decision. In the case of step 3, this meant moving ahead with the remaining steps. Long experience in DA showed that procrastination about any of the steps was dangerous, as it delayed our recovery and increased our risk of relapse. It also kept us from receiving the gifts of the program. Step 3 was a conscious choice of a new way of living rather than continuing in the insanity of compulsive debting. How did we go about step 3? Most of us completed the step with a sponsor, a member of our pressure relief group, or a close DA friend. We began with willingness. With all the willingness we could muster, we used these or similar words to take this step. Higher power. I stand before you ready to be transformed. I place myself in your hands. Guide me on my recovery path. Remove my compulsive debting, my self-centered fear, my own self-will. May I shine to others as a beacon of your power. May I choose to remain on your path always. DA members have experienced a variety of responses to this formal process. Some of us felt very different, introspective or joyful or peaceful. Others of us felt nothing at first, but in the days and weeks to follow, we began to notice a lightening of our moods and a sense of serenity. Some felt strange or confused, and it took a while to sort out why. There were no wrong emotional responses to taking step 3. We felt whatever we felt. We had entered a new phase of DA recovery. We had now truly undertaken a spiritual journey. At this point, we began to notice things we had not seen before, the little miracles of recovery. We had heard people talking about them in meetings. The check that arrived in time to allow a member to continue in school, a breakthrough in sales in a member's business, coincidentally meeting the right person to help with a job hunt, disheartened us and helped us grow in trusting our DA program and our higher power. We could not stop short of step 3 and expect to recover fully. Neither could we stop at step 3. Continuing the journey of the remaining steps would fulfill the commitment that we made by turning our will and our lives over to the care of a power greater than ourselves. We looked to sponsorship, our DA literature, and our higher power to guide us as we continued to move forward.